Hello. Before this episode starts, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's been supporting the podcast on Patreon, following and subscribing on Spotify, Amazon Music and on Apple Podcast. Also, to everybody who's taken the time to write an honest review. It really does help the podcast because the more people that follow and subscribe and write a review means the higher the podcast goes in the podcast charts. However, I do need to address a review which was made on Apple Podcasts just the other day. Somebody had written to say that the Alex Ferguson episode which I made had some bad language in it. I just want to make it really clear to everyone listening that there is never any bad language on Football for Kids, and there never will be. I have triple checked the Alex Ferguson episodes, and there is nothing even close to bad language in either of those episodes, nor is there anything in any of my other episodes. Football for Kids is a safe place to learn and be inspired by the stories from the sport which we love. I felt that I needed to address this, as I would hate for someone to see that review and not listen to the other episodes. Right then, let's get on with the show, shall we? Hello and welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. It's time for the Harry Kane Part 2. When I started the Football for Kids podcast in the summer of 2022, Harry Kane was one of the first episodes that I made. That episode is also one of the most listened to episodes that I've ever made. Over the past year, I have had, honestly, thousands of requests for a part 2 on Harry Kane. And as he's lighting up the Bundesliga in Germany and about to play a big part in yet another major football tournament for England, it makes sense to do Harry Kane part 2 now. Right, let's do a few of your reviews then. And this time, we're going to go around the world with your reviews, not just those which have been submitted in England. The first one, which is a 5-star review from Pele Boy, so thank you to you, has a headline of amazing. It says, "Hi, I'm 10 years old and I love Football for Kids. It is great. I listen to Football for Kids every day before bed. Please can you do some episodes about some rising football stars?" And that is from Sebastian in Germany. Well, Sebastian, a massive shout out to you and thank you so much for giving the podcast a 5-star review. And as always, it's always great to know that there are many listeners listening outside the UK as well. And the next one is from one of our listeners over in Australia. It says, "Best podcast ever." Well, thank you very much. And it gives the pod 5 stars. The review reads, "Dear Darren, my name is Levi and I am 9 years old. I just started listening to the podcast and I think it's amazing. I'm also listening from Australia. Please can you make an episode about Australian football?" Well, Levi in Australia, who's 9 years old, firstly, thank you for being a listener and thank you for taking the time to give the podcast a 5-star review. And secondly, I've already done an episode on Australian football, which is called Football Down Under. Now, many of you listeners would have found the podcast from travelling on a British Airways plane, and the Football Down Under episode was also on that. So you can either listen on the podcast, or if you're going on a British Airways plane anytime soon, you can listen to that episode there as well. And the last one for this episode is from one of our listeners in Canada. It says, "Our favourite podcast, 5 stars. My son and I enjoy this podcast so much. We are big football fans and love hearing all the stories. Highly recommend for parents and kids alike. Well, PWD owner, that's the person who left that review. A massive shout out to you. I hope that you're still enjoying the podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time to write that review. Right then, that's all we've got time for your reviews this week. It's time to get into part 2 about Harry Kane. If you haven't heard the first episode of Harry Kane, it will definitely be worth you checking that episode out before you listen to this. If you can't find it, it's episode 14. Blimey, I've just realised that was 134 episodes ago. Right, let's get on with it. Here's Harry Kane Part 2. We ended the last episode talking about how and whether Harry Kane would be able to take England to the finals of the World Cup at the Qatar 2022 tournament. So let's start things off there. The skipper led England for a successful group stage at the World Cup, winning their opening game 6-2, which was against Iran. Although Harry didn't score in this game, he was responsible for 2 of the goals and was a proper leader on the pitch. Then England drew 0-0 against the USA and followed up that game with a 3-0 win over Wales. Yet again, in that game, Harry was responsible for another assist and England finished top of the group. It wasn't until the knockout stages that Harry found himself on the scoresheet. England beat Senegal 3-0. Kane was one of the scorers and the skipper was leading the Three Lions to the quarter-finals. England played France in the quarters. England went 1-0 down after just 17 minutes until Harry Kane scored a goal from the penalty spot to give England the lift they needed. However, France's Olivier Giroud got his head to the ball, smashing it into the back of the net. And then England were awarded another penalty. At 83 minutes and 33 seconds to be precise, 2-1 down, Harry Kane stepped up to the spot and missed the penalty, sticking it over the crossbar. The French players celebrated like mad, and Jude Bellingham consolidated Harry Kane. Harry is one of the greatest penalty takers England has ever seen. But on that day, it just wasn't meant to be. England exited the World Cup, and Harry Kane, being the ultimate professional that he is, did all of the media interviews that he could, and he showed his appreciation to the crowd who had travelled. Being a world-class player and a captain is more than what you do on a football pitch. It's about what you do off the pitch that counts. After the World Cup, Harry Kane returned to the Premier League with Tottenham Hotspurs, and he stayed with them until the end of the season. And in the summer of 2023, there were rumours circulating about Harry leaving Spurs and joining another club. And then, on the 10th of August, it was reported that Bayern Munich, the most successful team in Germany, paid around 100 million euros for him, making him the most expensive signing in the Bundesliga history. Harry Kane left the Premier League having made 320 Premier League appearances. He scored 213 Premier League goals and he won 3 Golden Boots. The one thing which Harry left without was any trophies, and that is something that all footballers want to win. Harry made his Bayern Munich debut on the same day that he started. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go to plan, as Bayern Munich were beaten 3-0 in a German Cup game. The bad games didn't last though, as on the opening game of the season, Harry stuck his first goal in for Bayern Munich, and millions of people watched it around the world. Harry Kane had properly arrived in Germany. At the time of recording this, Harry Kane has been involved in over 40 goals for Bayern Munich this season. He's scored 34 and he's assisted 9 others. In fact, he's been responsible for more goals than any other player in the top 5 leagues across Europe. That is truly sensational. This summer is the Euros in Germany, and Harry Kane will lead the England team into the tournament as captain once again. No other male captain has played as a captain for England as many times as Harry since Bobby Moore over half a century ago. At 30 years of age, Harry still has some solid years of football left in him, and I'm sure he will continue to smash records, inspire millions, and I truly hope that he gets to lift some trophies. Before we go, here are 3 more stats about the England skipper that you need to know. Number 1. Harry Kane is the only English player in the history of the Premier League to have scored against every team he has faced. Erling Haaland recently achieved this and is the only other person other than Harry Kane to do so. Number 2. This season, Harry Kane has scored more goals alone than the Bundesliga side Wolfsburg have scored as a team all season in the league. That is a truly mind-boggling stat. And lastly, Harry Kane is the first player to score 2 or more goals in 8 games of their first Bundesliga season. He is a goal-scoring machine. I hope that you've enjoyed listening and learning to part 2 of Harry Kane, and I'm sure we'll have to do another episode on him in the future. So remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.